us bow in prayer. Loving and gracious God, your creative presence is at work each moment of each day, bringing life. Your eternal love is always near, seeking to draw us closer and closer to your heart. Help us to be open to your closeness each day. Help us to be open to you in a special way in these next few moments. And may you be pleased to use my words, all of our thoughts, all of our meditations, that through them and in spite of them, that we might be drawn closer to you, gain an added measure of your truth and of your love. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen. There was a book written many years ago called The Hiding Place. Some of you may know it. It's a true story written by Corrie ten Boom, a Dutch woman who, when she was in her 50s, along with her unmarried sister Betsy and her father, elderly father, lived in the Netherlands when Nazi Germany overtook the country in the 1940s during the Second World War. And this very ordinary Christian family were watchmakers by trade, if I remember correctly, and they found themselves hiding Jews in their home as the persecution of Jews by the Nazis increased, with more and more laws forcing Jews out of their businesses, out of their jobs, out of their homes, and limiting their ability to function in society. So the family was found out in time. They were sent to concentration camps, and only Corrie survived the war. And this book is about that time and about the strength of God and her faith, which enabled her to survive and enabled her to survive with the compassion and love that carried on after the war. Now, there was a movie version of this book made, I think, in the late 1970s by the Billy Graham Association, which I saw when I was going to university. And one of the scenes I remember had to do with the change in laws when all Jews were forced to wear the yellow Star of David on clothing when they were in public. And in the movie, Corrie's elderly father also lined up to get a star in solidarity with his Jewish neighbors. And I don't remember exactly all the details of the film, but one scene went something like this. The local, I think it was Dutch Reform minister, the Protestant minister anyway, came by the family and encouraged Corrie's dad and the family not to upset the authorities, not to defy them, and to kind of go along with what was happening. And afterwards, in my memory, the family is discussing the attitude of the minister, and either Corrie or Betsy, I can't remember, asked how a Christian minister could go along with such hatred and prejudice. And Corrie's father says something like this. He says, "Just because a mouse is found in the cookie jar, it doesn't make him a cookie." In the movie theater, we all laughed at that line, as you did. Now, I think it was because we understood the idea that faithfulness was not just about believing in God. It's not just about going to church or about knowing the Bible, but it was also about living in right ways and doing the right thing. I also think that we thought we would act differently in the same circumstances, which of course is a big assumption. It's always very easy to look back and judge others when we don't have to live in that situation. Corrie's father's witty remark points us to the scriptures we were reading today, I think, particularly the book of James. Now, I've always liked James. It's a very practical, down-to-earth book. And today we have a passage from chapter 2. And what he's doing, he's writing to the Christian community that lives outside of Israel. So remember, the church is a minority faith in the Roman Empire. This church is probably ethnically Jewish in a predominantly Gentile world. This church is probably filled with people who are from the lower or poorer classes of society and who have to live subject to the whims, the laws, and the customs of the society in which the wealthy have all the power and authority over them. So the issue James addresses is very profound and very challenging to such a community. James says that the church is showing favor to the wealthy or rich person who might show up to their church gatherings. He says there's a division being practiced between the rich and the poor in the Christian community. So listen to the verses 1 to 4 again, and the challenge James makes to his community. He says, "My brothers and sisters, do you, with your acts of favoritism, really believe in our glorious Lord Jesus Christ? For if a person with gold rings and in fine clothes comes into your assembly, And if a poor person in dirty clothes also comes in, and if you take notice of the one wearing the fine clothes and say, have a seat here, please, while to the one who is poor you say, stand here or sit at my feet, have you not made distinctions among yourselves and become judges with evil thoughts? Now James goes on to say that the rich ones are the ones who oppress them, referring to the poverty of the congregation. And yet we can see how it would be a great temptation to welcome the wealthy, to feel affirmed by the famous, to want to be accepted by the rich who control the society. So James points them to what he calls the royal law of the Scripture in verse 8, which is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. And James is very critical in verse 13 with a warning. He says, for judgment will be without mercy to anyone who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment. And then the punchline that gets to the heart of James' understanding of real Christian faith, much like Corrie ten Boom's father in the movie, James says, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm, and eat your fill, and yet you do not supply their bodily need, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. Strong words. They are words that challenge particularly Protestant teaching, particularly with the emphasis we've had traditionally on the idea that we are saved by faith alone. It's no wonder that Martin Luther, the first Reformation leader who emphasized this teaching, wanted to remove James from the Bible. He didn't like James. But James teaches us an important thing. James teaches us what faith looks like. Faith, you see, is not just a head thing, where we learn certain doctrines or theological understandings of God, or about Christ, or about the Bible. It's not just a heart thing either, where we feel emotionally the love of God through the Spirit, or discover a sense of peace, or hope, or strength in our worship, for example. Faith is also about action, reaching out to others in need, touching them with the practical hands of love that Christ demonstrated and consistently taught, which would be things like to feed the hungry, and give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked, to welcome the stranger, to tend the sick, and to visit those in prison, as Matthew 25 says. Now in Canada today, many people have rejected formal religion of any kind, the church included. All Christian denominations have lost membership and have not kept up to the growth of the Canadian population over the past several decades. And the second largest identifiable group in Canada after the Roman Catholic Church, when you're surveying religious affiliation, that second largest group is those claiming no religion. And then we come in third as the United Church. The non-religious group stands at about 24% of the population. And many who reject the church and faith do so because they believe the church or religion is irrelevant to modern life. Only interested in rituals of worship, maybe, promoting an outdated teaching of faith that rejects modern science. They reject a church that they see as condemning of those who don't fit the mainstream of society, the majority, and teach the belief in a God who lives in the sky, sitting in judgment on all humans for the smallest infraction, and yet does not stop the untold suffering that happens on the earth. And the truth is that in history, we have been those people. The truth is there are Christian churches and religions that are seemingly worried only about the form of religion, or seemingly worried only about correct belief or doctrine. And sometimes Christians promote a faith that is harsh and judgmental, and about a God who stands back in the face of untold suffering. But for many Christians in the world, and I would trust that that's all of us here as well, that's not what faith is about. There are many who understand that faith is meant to be about the teaching of James, a faith that moves us into compassion, generosity, justice-seeking, and peace-making in a world that has so much brokenness. James reminds us that in a very multi-ethnic, multicultural, economically diverse society, like the ancient Roman Empire of the early church, like our modern society, we are to practice an inclusive, welcoming kind of church where there is room and acceptance for all people. That's not always easy, but that's what we're called to do. It's very easy to make room for the popular or the famous, and not so easy to notice the outcast or unaccepted in society. But the faith that James calls us to, and that is a major theme in the scriptures and in the ministry of Jesus, is one which calls us to a spirituality of radical love and healing compassion for all. In Mark today, we see this kind of radical love and compassion demonstrated by Jesus. And it's an interesting and challenging little scene that Mark paints for us today. In the story, Jesus has quietly entered Gentile territory, something that Jews would try to avoid. He goes to the home of someone he knew. He's not out in public. This is in a home of a friend. A Gentile woman enters the home and begs Jesus to heal her daughter who is suffering from a demon, which would probably look like a mental illness to us today. Jesus responds in harsh ways that shock us. He says in verse 27, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." It's a derogatory remark. It's probably something that was commonly said amongst Jesus' society, his people. It might come from a very narrow understanding of his ministry, that he was there just for his own people. But nevertheless, it's derogatory. We also can be tempted to think only about our people in the face of the needs of others. You know that phrase, charity begins at home, we say in modern times, when what we really mean is, don't help others outside of our circle. But this woman who is begging at Jesus' feet will not give up. And so in verse 28 it says, she says, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." And Jesus responds immediately in a positive way by saying that her daughter will be healed, for he recognized the truth in her statement. And in this same passage then it goes on, he continues in the region, and he heals another Gentile man brought to him by that man's friends. This man is deaf, he cannot speak clearly, we're told, but Jesus heals him. And if you read the Gospels, you suddenly read that Jesus becomes known for a ministry of healing, for good news, acceptance that breaks down barriers, prejudices that divide and condemn people. Now in this little passage, for many, this passage about Jesus saying such hurtful words and then changing his mind, it's a hard thing to come to terms with. Christians have come to believe Jesus is the Son of God. He is fully divine as well as fully human, our traditional Christian theology teaches. So what does it mean when he says these words and then changes his mind? It seems that he was wrong and changed his mind. So what does this mean about our assumptions? Well, I think we don't have to worry, because I think it means that true spirituality, which Jesus demonstrated, includes the ability to recognize truth and to change one's mind in favor of that truth. True spirituality means being open to the Spirit of God when the Spirit speaks to us often through others, even others outside of our church, outside of our culture, outside of our beliefs, like this non-Jewish woman, this person who was not a disciple of Jesus, spoke a word of God so directly to Jesus that he recognized it and changed his mind in his way. I think spirituality involves being surprised by the wonder of God's presence in the world around us. It means adopting the values of radical love and compassion taught in Scripture and Christian theology. It means coming together as a community of faith to keep growing and learning and practicing those values and changing our minds when we need to. And then finally, it means reaching out in practical ways to heal the hurts and brokenness, injustice and suffering in the world. I think that when we seek to be a spiritual people as a church, in a way that is consistent with the practical and challenging teaching of James, and is consistent with the inspired, humble Spirit of Jesus, who could change his mind and grow in his understanding of God's calling, I think that if we sought to become this type of spiritual community, we would bring a light of hope to all those who've given up on faith, church, and religion. I think we could offer an alternate understanding of faith that makes sense for a modern people. A faith that's not about doctrine only. It's not about judgment and condemnation of others. It's not about serving a God who is far away, sitting in judgment on the world. But it's about a very biblical faith, about the God whose glory fills the earth, who is ever present and always close, seeking to lift up the poor and forgotten, to challenge the powerful, to find compassion and live in justice, and to bring life where there is only death. Such a spiritual community of faith will be a light of hope to many in a modern world who are searching for something to believe in. Amen. Let's continue our worship to present our morning offering.